So over the last 2 days I've made this hood, and it's really nice. It turned out better than I expected, to be honest, and do enjoy it a lot, and it will certainly keep me warm at many occasions. And if you want to see how it's made, stick around. It will be a very lengthy video on the construction of it, so if you're interested in making something similar, I suggest you watch the video, because even I didn't know how it would turn out, and made everything at the seat of my pants, so to speak. So no plans, no nothing, just an idea. So and should be said, it's been a pricey project. It's not cheap to come across lamb wool skins or pelts, I should say. So I really had to dedicate myself to this one. Then again, there's not much like it on the market, so it is a DIY project. Anyway, before I mess up even more, thank you for watching, and if you want to see more, just keep watching the video and you'll see the full construction. So there is a couple of reasons why I cut like I do. I don't want to cut through the fibers. I want them to stay intact to get a nice and fluffy edge, so to speak. So that's why I'm doing that way. I may have a problem seeing the markings, but I know where I'm going with it. So I don't want to make too much markings, because this will be the outside, and if I use some ink or something, it will be harder to remove. So yeah, I'm gonna trace a new line because it's not visible to me. So I'm doing it all by eye. I'm not too concerned with the looks. It's going to be an outdoors attire. I'm not going to wear it to a fancy dinner party or something. Not that I ever go to any fancy dinner parties, but you get the point. one of the reasons I love a crafting knife of this type to do this is have a nice point to poke through, and a beveled blade to get a nice draw cut. I was using a polishing tool. It's not a honing tool, so to speak, but it's an old Öberg, venerable Swedish company, and really quick, easy to get a secondary micro bevel on there and knock off all the burrs and roll out the rolls and stuff. So yeah, really like it. And I'm also, when I'm cutting, I'm aiming ahead, so I don't look at the cut, I look in front of it. That helps me get a smoother cut. Doesn't tend to be as wobbly, if that's a way to describe it. And I'm going slowly and carefully, so I don't cut the hairs on the pelt. Because if I were to cut it with the scissors, I would very likely cut off the hair. You can go with a very thin shanked scissors and get it underneath, but you will still cut fibers, so gives it a nice even look. So after making the perimeter cut, I see that I can optimize the pattern, and my lines are a bit skew in relation to that, so I'm gonna remark them and cut them. That's also why I really like using a type lead pencil. You can easily get it off with a eraser or something, and then it won't leave permanent marks on your project. So another thing, we are not evenly shaped front to back, so you want more in the back than you want in the front. If you have the same distance from your neck forward and from your back, or from your throat forward and from your neck backward, you will get an even keel look. You will get more hood in the front and less in the back. So a rule I do is I divide the piece in half, and then I measure 3 centimeters in the neck, or about an inch, just over an inch and a quarter, let's say. And in the front I take almost 5 inches, depending on how big your neck is, but I think that's a good start. And for a thing like this, you want to have your circumference of your neck measured out, and you have to add roughly 5 centimeters to get a bit of air. So I will check all those measurements before I cut and get back to you. So I've decided to cut the hole a bit bigger, and the reason for that is I'm going to have the fur. It takes a bit of, it's a thick material, so to speak, so I want to be able to have that in consideration so it doesn't get too tight. I'm using a very light hand when I do this. It got a bit wonky on the side, on the end, but I believe that's good enough. So I will make a couple of adjustments to it. Looks good so far, and wraps around, and as I tighten it, it conforms better to the shoulders. So I believe I will have a very good, nice, flexible hood, and probably put a couple of buttons here or something to keep it nice and tidy. And when it's warm, I can just open it up like a jacket and let heat out. To show you on the board what I did, I overlapped this. That gives it a cone shape, which helps it to conform to your shoulders. And this is depending on what body type you are and size and so on. So with the hood, I know that from one shoulder of my head to the other shoulder, I want about 70 centimeters or 27.5 inches. And I've done a bunch of hoods, sewed a lot for reenactment, mostly 15th century and Viking age, but I've also done some 14th century and some 11th, 12th century, but mostly in those areas. So I've done a lot of different hoods. I'm not going to use a historical pattern. I'm just going to use my collected experience from the other projects to map out this one. And I don't know if you can see it, but it has a patching here. I'm gonna cut that off. So if I use the measurement stick to show you, there will be roughly an edge or a cut here. I'm going to use these in the front to some capacity. I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to dry fit everything and check how it looks and works, and then I'm going to do the final trim on the piece, if that makes sense. So this is a very rudimentary line I'm gonna use. I might do a bit of a cap, so yeah, let's do that. I can always cut it off if I don't like it. I will also pinch it in the front to make it fit the head better, as well as in the back, but that will be obvious later on. I'm just using the measuring stick as a rudimentary guide. This isn't the kind of clothing item that you will see small imperfections, if you want. So I'm trying to keep a bit of the aesthetics of a pelt, if you want. So I'm not trying to make it too artificial. Not that I want to go full caveman, but anyway. So as you see, there's quite a bit of takes quite a bit of pelt to fit my big head, but yeah. So you can always make a passepoil. You make it out of cheaper fabric, and then you try out the pattern on yourself and so on. But when you have a fabric that's basically 3/4 of an inch thick, you run into problems. So I just go slow instead. So yeah, let's see what we learn from it. So what I learned from this very unscientific way of testing it was that I need to go down to here and have a line, and that is quite a bit more than I would do for a normal hood. I'm up 29 inches, 74 centimeters. So in order to get the circumference for the let's see, dropped it on the floor. Ooh. So I dropped it on the floor and it picked up a bunch of sawdust, but I have to clean that off later on. So what I have here is I take half of this, and that gives me a distance plus what I need in the back to sew it together, and in the front to make it nice. So if I bring that line over, it should be good. So I can make the cut here and match it up with the other side, with this side. So I make that cut. So in order to get a nice fit, you want to make an S shape. This is the neck, this is the shoulders, and then you go back to the neck. You can go down a bit. So that gives it a S-shaped curve. And this is just from experience and a lot of hoods. That will also help to keep the hood from being too high in the front. I'll explain that better later on. I'm just trying to make a nice swooping cut, and then I'll just move it over and replicate it on the other side. So now you can see the S shape better, I hope. So this is in the front, and this goes over the shoulder, and this is the back. Yeah. And I can just bring it over to the other side and see what we have. Yeah. Now I've cut it to shape, and it mimics it roughly. And I want to make the hood as big as possible when it comes to this part. So the way to adjust it in the neck is to fold it up and sew it, and that I can do when I mount this. So I'm gonna go for maximum length, Kenny style. So let's see. And I can always trim what I'm doing even more, so this is just to get rid of excess material, so I can more easily adjust the pattern. As I mentioned before, this would be very messy with a pair of scissors. You would get a lot of loose hairs everywhere, and this is one reason why I'm doing it out in my wood shop. Now the back matches up, and good enough anyway. So I'm going to try it again. I found some blue tape and it seems to work just fine, so it seems to hold together good enough. So it fits on the shoulders, not much to spare, but fits. And yeah, as you can see, it is a bit long, and that means that I can push my head to the back, and then I can roll up the front. So yeah, and also when you're sleeping, you can push your head up into the cone, and you'll have a nice warm sleep. So as you may have noticed, I don't have any plan for this one. I have a plan, but I don't have what do you call it? I don't have a plan to go after. I just have a general plan. So this is what it looks like when I offer them up to each other. And as you see, this part is a bit in front. I don't mind it being a bit in front, but I'm gonna tuck it in a bit and crinkle it up along the way. And this is just minute crinkles. It's just you're talking about maybe, how would I say, 1/8 of an inch with every stitch. So you divide it to the whole mantle piece or oak piece that you have over your shoulders. So it will naturally shrink the hood back. So that's the next thing, to sew it up. I'm letting the tape be on, stay on. So that will aid me a bit when I sew. Okay, get it on. So I'm using false sinew, and I like using thick material. It doesn't cut as well through the skin, and I also place it with a bit bigger distances, maybe 6-7 millimeters, roughly 1/4 of an inch. Reason for that is to leave as much material between the stitches as I dare, to keep the strength of the skin. So So I'm measuring about double distance because I know my stitches will be about a quarter of an inch in, and I will go over, under, over, under. Well, now we show it. So, and I use normal needles. They don't damage the hide that much, and then the hide shrinks around the thread, and yeah, makes for a longer lasting seam. If you use cutting heads on needles, you will damage the skin, the hide, and might not last as long. So when I start, I go under the fur, through the skin, and match up the length of the thread. And I also pull a bit of wool through. That's normal. So I have to dress that up when I'm finished. Let's see. Now I tuck in the wool, try to pull it to the other side. So now you see I get a nice start, and then I just go through the holes one more time, and that locks the seam. Almost forgot that I was gonna do a crisscross. So now I go over, under, like a figure eight, or the symbol for eternity. Try to go through the same hole so I don't make too much of a mess. And when I pull it tight, the pieces of hide should meet up in the middle. It's easier to see when I've cleaned it up. So then I just go half a centimeter further along, say quarter of an inch. Go through, take the next needle, do the same. That way they crisscross each other, and I'll rinse and repeat until I'm done. And it's important to keep the distances similar. That way you don't get the head on one side and shrink it, and so on. Because you will pull them together unevenly if you don't make the spacing equal length. So if you don't like the look of it, you can put a thinner skin on top and mask it, and put one stitch on each side. so I might do that in the future, but for the function of it, this will work just fine. So when I was sewing here, I came up with can't work and talk at the same time. I came up with an analogy. It is a bit like lacing a boot. You want to bring the edges to each other, so you don't bring them over each other, just bring them to each other. So that's what I'm doing, and I think now that I've made some progress, it's easy to see the pattern as well, and just going underneath the fur and lacing it together. So I've sewed it up. I left this piece as it is. I'm not sure if I'm gonna droop this down a bit. If I leave it straight, it will probably stick up over my head, so I'm probably going to droop it down a bit. I'm gonna leave that up to later when I decide, but time to try that. So quite happy with it. It sits pretty nice on the head, and it definitely will be nice and warm. So when I'm going to attach the hood to the oak, to the cape or whatever you want to call it, I go half and half. I start in the neck. I already have a seam in the neck that I can offer it up to, and yeah, that's where I start. Same way as with the hood. I'm going to use the existing hole on the side, opposite side of where I'm going to go. So that's roughly the same length. Then I'm going through the yoke part, struggling to find words. So now we have a start, and then I go in the same hole, but with the lacing technique. That way I have a very strong beginning, and next stitch will be in the middle of the of this area. So I'm gonna jump forward to the other side, go to the hole, that's already there, and cross over, get that one. Now just for added strength, I'm gonna go over to the opposite hole, through that. Now I've locked the neck seam into the yoke part. Let's continue. So I talked before about the hood being longer, this part being longer than this part. So what I'm gonna do is make shorter stitches on this side and longer stitches on this side. So I'm spacing out the stitches on the top side, keeping the stitch length that I have on the rest of the project, and I'm only increasing it with, let's say, a couple of millimeters. So if I have 10 millimeters here, I want to have maybe 7 here. That's closer to 1/4 of an inch, and this is closer to 1/8 of an inch. So with every stitch I pull the top material together, and this will stretch out a bit, so pull and tug. So it will start to bunch up here and stretch out here. So I've bunched it up here. You might see the crinkles. It also rounds off, and I stopped around here, and my material matches up pretty good. And as I showed before, I want to be able to roll the front, so that is a good fit. So yeah, gonna continue and finish it off on that side. This is just a quick tip if you're starting to get raw fingertips or something, or for whatever reason you need to use a pair of pliers. Wrap them in with a bit of tape, doesn't matter what kind, and it won't end up damaging your needle. So can start it, then this one is quite pull it through. And if you get the fur to poke through, you can go under the thread, pull it down and lock it in with the and have a nice even line there. So I'm finished with the sewing. I'm gonna leave the hood as is and probably tuck it down, strap it somehow so I can have the option of anyway. So the seams are complete, and it's not watertight, but it's definitely windproof. And yeah, you can see how it pulls in the top. The top was a bit thicker in the leather, so it stretched the mantle part a bit. That's not a problem. And yeah, I'll put it on, and it definitely muffles your hearing quite a bit, so but yeah, can I might do a second button up here. I'm gonna put one in the neck area to keep it tucked over, and then one down here, I guess. So yeah, also have the bib part. I can add that somehow. So most of what I'm doing is just feeling my way forward, and yeah, this might work. The hood is very pointy right now, and I can tuck that down if I want to. And if I need more space in the hood, I can release it, pull it down, and yeah, that will be really great when it's cold and I'm sleeping in the hammock. And another thing I want to show, walking around like this in the woods, I'm not gonna hear much and see much. So if I have it buttoned up, I can pull it down, and this will clear my ears, and I will be warm and nice in the neck area. And if it's too warm, I can just simply open it up, and yeah, really loving it. So next time it will be finished, and we'll see how it looks. Sewed up the hood. I still have a piece here that isn't sewn up. It doesn't, the wind doesn't pass through, so I might sew it up on a later date, but what I'm gonna do with it is to put a tab here and a button in the back, so I can put it like this. And the reason I don't remove it is when I have it on and I'm gonna use it for as a sleeping hood, I can pull my head up a bit further into the back and get a bit more warmth. So to be honest, I'm very pleased with how it turned out, and as you saw, the process is very fluid, and I only had an idea of what I wanted, and I didn't have all the answers before I started. And that can be very daunting if it's your first project, and you should be more careful in doing the passepartout, the pattern before and so on, to see that you're on the right track. But yeah, really like it. So the next step is to I'm gonna dye it brown instead, and yeah, I don't like my leathers to be whitish grey, so that's what I'm gonna do. And after that I'm gonna use sew on all the buttons and stuff, and again, I might not do all of them. I'm gonna put 2 up here, and the strap that goes across there, that I can adjust, but more to come. So let's get to dyeing. I am a bit impatient, and I'm just gonna find a sponge to use it to dye the leather with, but just gonna take paper. It will absorb a bit more of the dyeing agent, but yeah. So when applying it, I tend to go for a lot of dye and to try to cover as big as an area as possible, and to start from one end and move over to the other, so I don't get bit too patchy. I want an even result. So let's see how that goes. As you can see, I still have the threads on, doesn't melt too much. So this is a place I'm gonna put a button and yeah, shake it a bit. This is ROC brand Navsvärte. It's leather dye. I believe it's yeah, Denmark. Just put down a bit of paper on top of the oak board, and if you're a bit unsure of what it will look like, you can always take one of the cut-offs and see for yourself. And that will lighten up a bit when it dries. So this is the point of no return, and it's just a matter of sticking with it. As I said, a sponge would probably work better, but this is good enough for me. And so I'm making sure to dye it properly on the end and then feather it out. That way I don't get it patchy. So I'm working inch by inch, and each time I pass over the old spot as well. So I'm done with the big parts of the hood, and as you can see, there are places where it hasn't colored in, and that's because it's recessed. So I'm just going to use a small brush and color in those areas. And yeah, it's a bit tedious, but yeah, the result is speaking for itself. So I've done a bit here. So compared to that, that's day and night. So when I sewed it, it pulled through some of the wool, and an easy way to get it off is just burning in. So I'm pretty happy with the result. So now I'm gonna treat it with it's a mixture of beeswax and linseed oil and turpentine. There will be a link in the description below to bullthrush channel where he shows it, and I will probably make a video on it in the future, but for now that's a good source to it's a really good video on how to make it. So the way I like to apply it is to put on a pair of gloves, and now it's quite cold, but still malleable, and just mash it out. You can go over it with a heat gun from a bit of a distance to help it soak in. Or you can use a hairdryer or something. It's a bit less risky with a hairdryer. Or you can just leave it in a warm space. There's a lot of ventilation. And turpentine, balsamic turpentine, is quite strong, and this will help with the waterproofing. So it can get a bit sticky, but with time it will soak into the leather and the rest will evaporate. So I don't know if the camera picks it up, but there's quite a difference in coloration. It's much darker when you've treated it, and looks a bit rough and ready at the point at this point, but I'm gonna go over it with the heat gun, and make sure when you do that to have a good distance. One way to check if you have a proper distance is to put your hand in front, move it closer, and when it starts to be a bit uncomfortable, that's the distance you want to be at. I believe it's about 3 ounces I've used so far, or close to. And the way I go about doing this is starting up at the seam. So I started on the seam another way, and now I'm starting at the seam from this way and out to the edge of the brim. That way I know that I have plenty of coverage in the seams. And I try not to mess up the fur, so I have that hanging off the board so it doesn't touch that much. So now I'm done with the waterproofing. You can see the shine. So just gonna apply some heat to it, and that will drink in faster than if it was just placed in a ventilated warm area. So quite cozy. I'm looking forward to a night's sleep in this one. So I'm putting the finishing touches, sewing on the buttons, and just want to show you the mechanics behind. So this is the one that's from the hood piece, neck. So it can swivel around the bottom. The bottom is sewn both in the shoulder pieces and the hood piece, so gives it a bit of strength and rigidity. And have one shorter slot and one longer slot. So this one goes over the button I'm not going to open, and then I'm going to place another button bit stiff still. So I'm gonna place the other button here somewhere. So I'm gonna measure that out now, and that is just me taking it on and finding out what spot it will sit in. So I'm looking at the shoulder part and see if there's wrinkles or anything, and that when that's sorted out, I will know that know where to put the button. That's about there. Yeah, it lines up nicely right about there, so that's where the button is going to go. Now I've attached the closing mechanism, opening and closing mechanism, and this one is on purpose too long. The reason for that is I want to be able to have it open to get a bit more air if I want to. So I can put it in the auto position and it will let out some heat. Will be a bit more loose fit when I pull down the hood compared to how it would be otherwise. So and these straps I can change out as I want. They are just something I attach to the buttons. So if I place it in the closed position, when I pull it down it sits more snug. I'm gonna put a strap on top. I'm gonna put the button down below, so it will attach here. So it's all done. The couple of things. I finished that one off, and only thing left is to use the same treatment on the new leather work as I did on the rest of the hood. So really nice and warm, cozy, and yeah, I'm gonna do an episode when I'm out in the woods using it to see how it works and functions. Just to be able to cut off all the cold air around your neck is very nice, and yeah, so thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye guys.